They don't need it, I heard her say through the vent. Old people don't need warmth. They barely move anyway. That was 3 days ago. Since then, the radiator in my attic room has remained cold. January has not. I sleep in socks and gloves, 2 sweaters and my old woolen coat. Sometimes I boil water just to hold the kettle in my hands. It makes my knuckles ache less for a moment. Then the steam vanishes, like I have, and the chill creeps back in. This attic used to be storage. Boxes, dusty lamps, things no one wanted but couldn't throw away. Fitting, I suppose, that it became my room. They say it was my idea, that I offered to move up here when Jimmy and Allison had the twins and needed space. But that's not how I remember it. I remember coming back from the hospital. I'd had a fall, and finding my old room painted over, my bed gone, a crib in its place. Jimmy said, "Just for now, Ma. We figured it'd be easier with the babies. The attic's fine. We put a little heater there." That little heater was already broken. Allison never replaced it. I don't complain. Haven't. Not once in the 3 years I've lived in this box with slanted ceilings and one tiny window that doesn't close properly. I even sew the curtains myself to fit its odd shape. But today, the silence in me feels louder than their noise downstairs. I hear the TV on. I smell beef stew. I imagine heat flooding the house, everywhere but here. My hands are too stiff to knit. I used to knit every evening. Now I sit in the armchair, the only chair, and stare at the floorboards. They creak differently in the cold. Last night, the pipe under the sink in the attic bathroom froze. I told Jimmy this morning. He grunted. Allison didn't look up from her phone. I paid the plumber, like I pay the groceries, and the property tax, and the insurance, and the car lease on the SUV Allison drives. I paid for this house 27 years ago with my husband, Roy. When we built it, it was just a single story, no attic. That came later, when Roy passed and Jimmy said we should expand. Funny how things expand. Rooms, expectations, resentment. When Roy died, I stayed strong for Jimmy. He was 29 then. He cried on my shoulder. I told him we'd be okay. I sold Roy's tools, some jewelry. We pulled through. Now, when I cough too loudly, Allison rolls her eyes like I'm disturbing something sacred. I've been keeping track. Quietly. Gas bills. Maintenance. That trip they took last summer. The one funded by Allison's bonus? I paid that credit card bill. Maybe I'm being petty. Maybe. But this morning, when I went down to the kitchen, only because the kettle upstairs gave out, I heard her again. Allison. "She uses so much gas," she whispered. "We can't keep paying for it. She sits all day anyway. She doesn't need the heat." I stood there with my hand on the kettle, watching the flame beneath it, watching it flicker. Warm, greedy, alive. I didn't say anything. I poured my water. I came back up. But I didn't forget. Today, I opened the file. The big blue one in the box marked House. And I realized something. My name is still on the land. Not theirs. Mine. They cut off the heat. They shouldn't have. The attic wasn't always mine. It became mine by suggestion, then by habit, then by quiet force. The day I moved up here, no one said the word permanent. Jimmy kept saying, "Just while the twins are little," like it was a favor I was doing, like it wasn't my house, too. Allison smiled that tight, polite smile and offered to help me carry my things upstairs. My things, meaning the 2 suitcases she let me keep in the hallway closet. Everything else had already been reorganized. My old room, the one Roy and I slept in for nearly 3 decades, had been repainted soft green and filled with baby furniture before I came back from rehab. There was a rocking chair in the corner where Roy's dresser used to stand. A mobile of sheep hung over the crib. I remember standing in the doorway, disoriented, thinking I'd walked into someone else's home. Jimmy had his arm around me when he said, "We just thought it'd be easier this way." No one asked me. That's how it always started, with decisions made while I wasn't there. "Ma, we'll set you up cozy in the attic," Jimmy said. "I'll put in insulation. You won't even notice the cold." He didn't put in insulation. He put down a rug from the garage and nailed a curtain across the stairwell for privacy. Roy's desk, the old one with the dented corner from when Jimmy banged his tricycle into it, gone. Donated. Along with my vanity, my quilt chest, the big cedar armoire I inherited from my grandmother. "Too heavy for the stairs," Allison had said. They left me a twin bed and a folding table. And a smile. "You've got the best view in the house," Jimmy joked, gesturing to the tiny gable window. "Sunsets up here are amazing." Sunsets. As if I could watch them while curled under 3 blankets, trying to keep my breath from fogging up the glass. The room shrank around me. I didn't notice at first. I still helped with the cooking. I still folded laundry. Still slipped 20s into Jimmy's wallet when he looked worried. That's what you do for your children, right? You give, and you keep giving, until you forget how to want anything back. The shift was slow. I wasn't allowed to touch the thermostat. "We've got the smart system now," Allison would say. "Don't worry, it adjusts automatically." But it never adjusted for me. One spring, I asked about my name being on the deed. "Of course it is," Jimmy said. "You're protected, Ma. But it's better if the house is in my name for taxes." We went to the notary. I signed a power of attorney. "Just so we can help with things in case anything happens," he said. I didn't read it all. My eyes were tired. I trusted my son. I didn't think trust had an expiration date. When the backyard was paved over for a pool, no one asked if I wanted the cherry tree saved. I planted it with Roy the summer after Jimmy was born. It was old, gnarled, but it still bloomed. It's gone now. When they remodeled the kitchen, my recipe books disappeared. "Everything's online now, Ma," Allison said. She always called me Ma, never Mom, never Mother, just a syllable, like a command. And then there was the land. 3 acres behind the house, Roy's pride. We kept hens there once, had a garden, a tiny orchard. I thought it was ours forever. Jimmy had different plans. "It's just sitting there, Ma," he said one day, over coffee. "We could sell the back acre to that developer, just the edge. They're offering cash." I said no. He asked again, and again. Finally, I agreed. To half an acre. "No more," I said. "I want the rest untouched." He nodded, smiled. Of course. 3 months later, I saw stakes in the ground. Yellow tape. Construction vehicles. They sold the full acre. I asked him. He avoided my eyes. "It made more sense," he said. "It was too messy to split. Don't worry, we still have 2. 2. Just enough for their plans. A pool, a fire pit, an outdoor kitchen, no space for me. And now, a year later, here I am. In a box above the kitchen, wrapped in a scarf inside my own home. The vent rattles. I hear the twins laughing downstairs, then the beep of the microwave, and beneath that, her voice. If she wants to be warm, she should go to a home. They have heating there. My hand tightens around the mug. Tea, long gone cold. A home. I built this home. I scrubbed its floors, picked its fixtures, paid its mortgage. I've buried parts of myself in every beam and tile. She wants me out, but I'm not the one who's going to leave. The mornings are the hardest, not because of the cold, although that's a cruel constant now, but because of what it tells me, that they've decided I don't matter. Not enough to fix the heater, not enough to check in, not enough to remember I'm still here. I wake before the sun. Habit, mostly. Roy was an early riser. Start the day before the day starts on you, he used to say, tying his boots while the coffee percolated. I still wake early. Only now I wake to silence. No smell of coffee, no hum of life. Just the soft ticking of the old alarm clock on my bedside table and the deep, creeping ache in my hands. I sit up slowly. My knees don't bend like they used to. The bones grind, reluctant. I pull on my gloves, the fingerless ones I knit years ago, and wrap a scarf over my shoulders. Then I go to boil the kettle. It's the only source of warmth I'm allowed. The attic bathroom smells faintly of mold. The window in there never quite closes. I taped the edges, but the wind still finds its way in. The pipe under the sink froze again last night. I brush my teeth with cold water from the bottle I keep beside the bed. I don't tell them anymore when something breaks. Downstairs, the heater hums. I can feel the warmth rising through the floorboards if I press my palms to the wood. A reminder, warmth exists. Just not for me. I used to make breakfast for everyone. It started after Roy passed. Cooking made me feel needed. The kitchen was my space, the one place they didn't rearrange. I'd fry eggs, slice fruit, pack the twins' lunchboxes with little notes. Now I'm not allowed to cook unless Allison's out. The kitchen's already tight, she said after the last remodel. Too many hands make a mess? I've started keeping food upstairs. Crackers, canned soup, peanut butter, things that don't need refrigeration. They're stacked in a small plastic bin under my bed next to the box of bills I pay. Yes, I still pay. Not all. They'd never let me touch the mortgage anymore. But enough. Water. Trash. Jimmy's phone bill, still on my plan after all these years. The gas bill, too, which makes me laugh bitterly sometimes. I pay to heat the rooms I'm not allowed in. A few weeks ago, Allison bought new curtains for the dining room. Velvet. Deep burgundy. Thermal lined, she boasted to a friend over the phone. Makes a big difference. I wanted to ask if they made a difference in the attic too, but I didn't. I've learned not to ask. The twins, Ben and Ellie, they're 6 now. They still come upstairs sometimes. Not often. Allison doesn't like it. Says it's dusty and they could trip on the stairs. But when they do come, they bring joy with them, like snowflakes sneaking in under a door. They ask about Roy. They remember his picture. I tell them stories, the ones Jimmy used to love. About the time their granddad tried to build a treehouse and ended up stuck between 2 branches for an hour. About how he sang off key but danced like a dream. They giggle, sit cross-legged on my rug, and eat the ginger snaps I sneak for them. Sometimes I wonder how long I'll be allowed even that. Allison's world is sleek, controlled. Everything in its place. I am not in her place. A week ago, she said to Jimmy, she needs more care than we can give. Maybe it's time to talk options. She said it like I was furniture, like options meant disposal. Jimmy didn't answer. That's his way. Quiet, blank. I can't tell if he agrees or is just afraid to disagree. He used to be different. When Roy died, he called me every day. After Ellie was born, he asked me to help, said he couldn't imagine raising kids without me. Now, I imagine he could. I sat with that thought last night. Sat in my coat on the edge of the bed, looking at the sliver of moon through the crooked attic window and thought, they could live without me. Easily. They already are. But could they live without my name? Because that's what holds this house in place. Not just sentiment, not just memory. Paper. And paper still listens to me. I pulled out the file again. Checked the dates. The signatures. The deed. The tax forms. The power of attorney. I'd signed more than I remembered. Given away more than I realized. But one thing remained. The land. The title was in my name, jointly, with Roy. And after he passed, it stayed with me. Jimmy never filed the transfer. Said it wasn't urgent. It is now. I opened the closet and reached for Roy's box, the one I hadn't touched in years. It still smelled like cedar and dust and him. Inside, his watch, his army medal, a small metal flashlight, and a letter he wrote before his surgery, just in case. I read it again, even though I know every word. If you're reading this, May, then I didn't make it. I'm sorry. But I need you to promise me something. Don't let them push you out of the life we built. You built. You've always been the strong one. I folded the letter, set it on the table, then I opened my laptop and searched for a lawyer. Roy built the porch with his own hands. It wasn't perfect. The railing leaned a little to the left, and the third step creaked no matter how many times he hammered it down. But it was ours. He'd come home from the mill, wash up at the outside tap, and sit on that porch with a glass of iced tea while the sun set over our little patch of Carolina dirt. This house is nothing fancy, he used to say, but it's honest, just like us. I still sit on that porch sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet and no one's watching. I wrap myself in Roy's old hunting jacket and tiptoe down the stairs, avoiding the ones that squeak. The cold bites harder now, especially in my bones. But some things are worth braving the chill for. Memory, for one. The house has changed. Allison's made it modern. Updated, she says, like that's always an improvement. Gray paint, stainless appliances, pendant lights that cost more than our first refrigerator. The porch is still there, but she wants to enclose it. Add a sunroom. She says it's wasted space. Wasted. I remember when Roy built that porch, one paycheck at a time, every weekend for 6 months. Jimmy was 8 then, always trailing behind with a plastic hammer, pretending to help. Roy would laugh and say, "He's building memories, May. That's worth more than any tool." There's a photo of that somewhere. Roy, shirtless and tan, hammer in hand, Jimmy at his feet, smudged with sawdust. I keep it in a drawer in the attic. Allison didn't want old photos cluttering up the walls. Said they didn't match the decor. I've been eroded from this house piece by piece. The blue floral wallpaper Roy picked for our bedroom. Gone. The sun-faded curtains I sewed after Jimmy was born. Thrown out. The spice rack Roy carved from cherry wood, replaced with a chrome one from a catalog. The only thing untouched is the attic, because no one wants it. Sometimes I think they don't even want me. Jimmy used to call every morning on his way to work. Even after he moved back in, he'd knock on my door to say good morning. That stopped when Allison's maternity leave ended. The house got busier, louder, but I got lonelier. I used to be the first one they turned to, for babysitting, for advice, for money when times were tight. Then slowly, the calls became fewer, the conversations shorter. Gratitude turned into assumption, and assumption turned into silence. When did I become a shadow? It wasn't one moment. It was 100 small ones. Like when Allison gave away my armchair without asking. The one Roy gave me for our 20th anniversary. We needed room for the twins' playpen, she said. You still have your bed. Or when Jimmy canceled my doctor's appointment because he had a client emergency. I ended up taking the bus, standing for 20 minutes in the rain, because I didn't want to be a burden. Or the time they went to the beach for the weekend, left me with the kids, and forgot to tell me they'd be gone for 3 days. We figured you wouldn't mind, Jimmy said later, sheepish. You love the kids. I do. I love Ben and Ellie with everything in me. But love isn't the same as permission. They don't see the difference. That's the trouble with being quiet. People think your silence is agreement, that your stillness is weakness. Roy knew better. You're the anchor, May, he told me once after a fight with his brother. People lean on you so hard they forget you're carrying them. That memory followed me to the lawyer's office. Her name was Dana Liu. Young, sharp eyes, warm smile. She didn't talk down to me. She listened, took notes, asked questions. You still have legal control over the land, she said, tapping her pen on the deed. And from what I can see here, you have a strong case for contesting the transfer of power of attorney, especially if it was signed under vague pretenses. I nodded. I hadn't told her everything. Not yet. But enough. Dana leaned forward. May, you've got more leverage than they realize. If you want to regain full control, or even sell, you can. Sell. That word echoed like a bell. They built their lives on this house, their comfort, their pride. Allison hosted book clubs here, posted photos of the patio on social media, bragged about family land. But the land isn't hers. It isn't even Jimmy's. It's mine. That night, back in the attic, I sat at the folding table and stared at the deed, not out of revenge, not even anger. Clarity. They froze me out of the warmth of my own home. I could shut the whole house down. I could sell it. I could walk away. But I'm not walking anywhere. They will. I asked for the heat. That's all I did. It was 2 days ago. I came downstairs while Allison was loading the dishwasher. Jimmy wasn't home yet. The kids were outside, bundled in coats too big for their limbs, chasing one another through leftover leaves. She didn't look at me, just kept rinsing plates like I was part of the faucet hum. Allison, I said gently, the radiator upstairs hasn't worked in over a week. It's getting hard to sleep. A pause. Then, without turning, she said, We're trying to cut the gas bill. You know how expensive it is this year. I understand, I replied. But the attic's not insulated and the window, maybe you could sleep downstairs some nights, she cut in. On the couch. It's warmer here. She said it like she was offering a favor. The couch I bought 20 years ago. The one she said clashed with the new color palette, but kept because it was too much effort to replace. The same couch where I nursed Jimmy through the chicken pox, where Roy napped every Sunday after church, where Ben threw up apple juice just last month. I didn't answer. Allison finally turned, her arms crossed, wet from the sink. If you're cold, wear another sweater. She didn't mean it cruelly. That was the worst part. She meant it efficiently, as if warmth was a matter of resourcefulness, as if dignity could be layered. I stood there, small in the glow of the recessed lights, her kitchen spotless, her mouth tight with tolerance. Then she said it, quietly, as if to herself, but loud enough. Old people don't need warmth. They barely move anyway. I felt it like a slap. Not the words, I've heard worse, but the conviction, the certainty that I was no longer part of the equation. Just another line item on a spreadsheet. I went back upstairs without a word. That night, the cold was deeper. Not outside. Inside me. I wrapped myself in Roy's jacket, curled tight, and stared at the ceiling, tracing cracks that looked like rivers on a map. My joints throbbed. My breath misted in the dark, and I realized something. She wasn't wrong. Not entirely. I don't move much anymore. But when I do, it counts. The next morning, I dressed early. Dark pants, a navy cardigan. I brushed my hair, pinned it back the way Roy liked. Put on the gold locket he gave me our last Christmas together. Then I went to the garage. The gas shutoff valve is in the corner, behind the old workbench. Jimmy never bothered to move it when he renovated. Probably didn't think I remembered where it was. I remember everything. I turned the valve. It was stiff, hadn't been moved in years. But it gave way with a groan. The silence that followed was immediate, deeper than cold, like the house itself had paused to notice. I stood there for a moment, my hands trembling. Then I went back upstairs and made tea on my electric kettle. Plugged into the outlet I paid to have installed myself. By noon, the house noticed. Allison called up the stairs. "Is your water working?" I didn't answer. She came up 10 minutes later, face flushed. "Did you touch something?" I looked at her, calm, steady. "Something wrong?" I asked. "The heat's off. The stove won't light. Jimmy's calling the utility." "Ah," I said, and sipped my tea. By evening, the kitchen was cold. The twins wore extra socks. Jimmy kept flicking switches, muttering about the pilot light. I stayed in the attic. That night, the silence was different. It wasn't defeat. It was decision. The cold sharpens things. It makes edges of the day easier to see. Last night, beneath the thin attic ceiling, the world narrowed to small practicalities. Where to place my feet so they would warm, which sweater to double over my chest, how long it took a cup of tea to go from steaming to lukewarm. Downstairs, it was another life. Through the floorboards came the clink of glasses, the murmur of conversations, Allison's measured laugh, the sound she used when she wanted the room to think everything was charming. She'd invited a handful of women from her book group, some neighbors whose pictures she'd shown me on her phone, and who always wore the kind of jewelry that gleamed like small excuses. There was wine, platters warm and aromatic, a soft playlist that made the room feel curated, even when the conversation frayed. I heard them set the table. I heard the toast. I heard the burst of laughter when someone told the same trivial story Allison loves, the one about the bakery mishap where Allison bravely saved the dessert. She sounded pleased with herself. I imagined the table lit from below by the heat Allison insisted the house needed to feel right. Warm atmosphere, good lighting, curated company. Up here, I pulled my coat tighter and tried to read. The page fogged at the margins where my breath touched the paper. I could have gone down. I could have knocked on the door and said, "May I join you?" That image, me fluttering into the dining room in my attic clothes, tasted like humiliation before I even imagined it. I have eaten at enough tables to know when the welcome is performative. Ben and Ellie came up once, small shadows at the stairhead. They crept like little spies, reluctant to trouble. Ben held a paper crown he'd made, its edges sticky with glue. He remembered my stories. Ellie pressed her face against the banister, breath warm in the cold. They looked at me like I was a secret they wanted to keep. "Granny, you should come down," Ben whispered, eyes bright. Allison's voice from below sliced through the hush. "No, not tonight. Go play. Granny will be fine." Ben's face fell. Ellie pulled her brother back, and they left without a fuss. I heard their tiny footsteps run across the laminate like a rehearsal for absence. Once the door closed, the house filled with a different kind of sound, muffled joy, cutlery arranging itself into rituals, and the steady, oblivious warmth of people who believed comfort was theirs by right. I sat very still and listened. There was a moment when laughter swelled so full it echoed up into my attic, like music coming through a closed window. Almost beautiful, until I remembered whose hands had paid for that menu, whose money kept the lights that made the crystal gleam. I thought of the pool plans and the expensive curtains. The weekend trips they told me were a necessary splurge because Allison needed her break. I slept in my coat that night, at last without the pretense of rest. It felt odd to fall asleep wearing the garment Roy had once teased me for keeping for the apocalypse. Maybe it was an apocalypse in its own small way. I dreamed of the porch, of Roy's laugh, of a cherry tree in full bloom that no one watered anymore. When I woke, my face was stiff from the cold, my hands numb enough that unfastening the kettle's plug felt like untying a knot. I listened for footsteps, for the soft shuffle of human business. The house smelled faintly of lemon and reheated roast. Someone had left a casserole on the counter. The radiator at the foot of the stairs remained mute. At breakfast, their voices downstairs sounded strained. Jimmy paced once, then twice. I heard him open and close the front door, then the hatch to the garage. The same rhythms that used to be my noonday soundtrack. For a moment I thought he might come up, see the frost on the window, the condensation like tiny gray spiderwebs. He didn't. Instead, Allison called up, "Mom? Is everything okay up there? The pilot light must have gone out. The technician's on his way." I put my fingers around the mug until they warmed. I could have shouted down, "It's been out for weeks." I could have told them how it bit into my bones like a small, diligent animal. But I stayed quiet. There is a deliberate economy to silence. It conserves something inside you. Dignity, maybe, or the last of your surprise. Later, when the technician came and the house flared back to life, their relief had a brittle edge. Apologies were made, the sort that dissolve into Instagram photos by morning. Allison fussed over a pillow, smoothing it like a woman who touches things to prove they're hers again. Jimmy hovered, apologetic and evasive in equal measure. They thought the problem solved, that the world could be buttoned up again with a wrench and a bill. They did not know how close I had come to making something else click. They did not know that I had walked the yard that morning and counted the boundary stones, that I had spoken to a neighbor who remembered where every surveyed stake had been driven. They did not know that the pages in Roy's blue folder were not just relics. They did not know I had learned the language of names and signatures. For them, the heat returned, and with it, the illusion that everything could continue as before. For me, the quiet between one night's darkness and the next decision stretched, clear and full of possibility. I fed the kettle and watched the steam rise, thinking of the thing I could do that would make their house feel the way I had felt, unwanted and small, not out of spite, out of fairness. The envelope came that afternoon. I heard the mailbox clang, then the sound of Ellie's light feet padding to retrieve it. She didn't bring it to me. She never did. But I waited a few minutes, then made my slow descent. There it was, half hidden under a pile of catalogs on the console table. White envelope, my name typed neatly across the front. No return address, but I knew the seal, the bank's. I opened it with a letter opener Roy once gave me, the one with the chipped bone handle and initials scratched faintly on the side. Inside, a monthly statement. I sat at the kitchen table, my old one, now bleached and refinished to match Allison's aesthetic, and read it. Gas company, $380 property insurance, $716 to water and sewer, $289 Jimmy's mobile service, $146 Ellie's online learning subscription, $39 a donation to Allison's Charity of the Month campaign, $200. They had my card on file. Not one of them ever asked. It was always temporary. Always, just until we get through this patch. That patch turned into 6 years. 6 years of invisible drafts siphoning off my savings, like someone had poked a hole in the side of my life and let it drain. I folded the statement. Put it in my notebook. Then I took the stairs up to the attic. Slow, deliberate, like each step was an answer to a question I hadn't yet asked out loud. I sat on the bed, pulled the plastic bin from beneath it, and added the latest document to the growing pile. I sorted the folder by vendor, added sticky notes, colored tags. I'd helped Jimmy do his taxes for years. He used to bring them to me with receipts crumpled in a grocery bag. I taught him to file, to track, to pay attention. He forgot. I didn't. When I opened my laptop, I didn't go to social media. I didn't check the weather or read the news. I opened my bank's website, clicked into the automatic payments section, and scrolled. There they were. A list so long I had to keep reloading the screen. Monthly, quarterly, yearly. For utilities, for memberships, for accounts I didn't even recognize. Some in my name, some not. Some tied to addresses I didn't live at anymore. I hadn't realized how much I was still holding up. There's a kind of power in seeing all the ways people lean on you, and a different kind of power in realizing you can stop. I picked up the phone and called Richard, my account manager. He's been with the bank for over a decade, knows me by name, knows my family, or at least the version I use to show the world. Mrs. Hollis, he said warmly, how can I help you today? I cleared my throat. Richard, I'd like to cancel every active automatic payment and draft tied to my personal accounts. A pause. All of them? Yes. Every single one. Immediately. Even the household services? Especially those. He didn't argue, just said, understood. There may be some pending charges. We can dispute those after. I'll begin the process now. As he typed, I stared at the attic window. Frost had begun to collect again in the corners. It wasn't poetic, just expected, like the consequences of neglect. After Richard confirmed the changes, I added one more request. I'd like to open a trust, I said, in my name, with Ellie as the sole beneficiary. He paused again. Not Jimmy? No. Understood. Would you like to schedule a consultation? Yes, tomorrow morning. And Richard? Yes, ma'am? Please make sure all correspondence from now on comes directly to me. No joint notifications. No permissions granted. No access. He hesitated, but his voice remained respectful. Of course. When we hung up, I sat very still. My hands trembled a little. Not from fear, not quite. From the strange weight of action. From the feeling that something irreversible had finally shifted inside me. And there was no use reaching back for the woman who tolerated things for the sake of keeping peace. Because peace built on silence isn't peace at all. It's surrender. Downstairs, I heard the front door open. Jimmy came in. He laughed, called out something to the kids. Allison told him dinner would be ready in 10. They sounded happy. I closed the laptop. Let them enjoy it. Tonight would be the last warm dinner they had at my expense. It was Carrie who answered the phone at the wedding agency. I remembered her voice before she said her name. That chirpy, bright tone people use when they think they're talking to someone who's never going to cause a scene. Except this wasn't about weddings, not this time. "This is Carrie speaking. How can I help you today?" "Hello, Carrie," I said calmly. "This is May Hollis. I believe my name is still listed on several vendor accounts connected to this property." There was a pause, then the sound of typing. "Oh, yes, Mrs. Hollis. Yes, I see your name here. Let's see. Yes, gas utility sponsorship, landscaping renewals, the maintenance plan, 2 security subscriptions, all of which I would like canceled." Another pause, then a slower tone. "I understand. May I ask?" "No, just make the cancellations, effective immediately." I could hear her fumbling, papers shuffling. "I'm sorry, but some of these are under your son's household registration. I'll need permission." "You won't," I said, "because the payment method is mine, the account is mine, and the land is mine. You'll find the supporting documentation on file. I faxed them this morning." Another pause, a deeper one. "I'll process that now," she said, her voice suddenly careful. "We'll notify the vendors." "Good. One more thing. Please add a note to the file. Future sponsorship requests from this address are to be denied unless I approve them directly. No exceptions." I could almost hear the switch flip in her head, from chirpy to corporate. Understood. When I hung up, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. I looked at the table. On it lay the property map. The faded ink circled the original perimeter Roy and I bought in 1973. Before any extensions, before Jimmy's backyard kitchen, before the pool Allison had insisted was a necessity for resale value. So many things bought with other people's money and other people's memories. The truth is, I never wanted to weaponize anything, not money, not land, not the slow dignity of age. But the day you become invisible is the day you stop being protected. And I had become invisible, but not powerless. There's a difference. That afternoon, I walked the perimeter myself. 3 acres. Quiet, flat, half frozen from the last cold snap. The cherry stump was still there. A flat disc now, ringed with moss. They'd built their fire pit not 5 feet from it, like it didn't matter what roots they burned. I marked the fence line again. The new construction site on the far edge of the property buzzed in the distance. The developer Jimmy had tried to sell to when he thought I wasn't watching. He hadn't filed the easement. He couldn't, because he didn't have the rights. It was all still mine, and soon it would belong to someone else. Just not him. The next day, I met with Dana again, the lawyer. Her office smelled faintly of cedar and coffee, and her eyes never once flicked to her phone. She listened. "I'd like to proceed with the transfer," I said, sliding the paperwork across the table. "A clean sale. Full rights to the land. With the condition that I remain in the attic room until I choose to vacate." Dana raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said. "Let them live in my house, on someone else's land. Let's see how that feels." She nodded slowly. "We'll need a buyer." "I have one," I said. "Mr. Jacob Adler. He's been trying to purchase the lower acre for years. He's respectable. He'll maintain the garden. No luxury condos." Dana smiled. "You've thought this through." "I've had years," I replied. When I returned home, the house looked the same. White shutters, curved stone path, porch light flickering in the cold. Inside, the kettle boiled. The kids were arguing over a board game. Allison was on the phone, discussing curtain rods. Jimmy was watching something on his tablet. I passed through all of it like fog, not hidden, just unseen. Upstairs, the attic held its usual chill, but I didn't mind it anymore. Not when the ground beneath this house had finally begun to shift. Not under me, but under them. They just didn't know it yet. They say a house is only as strong as its foundation. Ours was poured by hand. Roy and I spent 2 summers saving, planning, staking lines with twine tied to rebar, hammered into the clay. Jimmy was barely 6, more interested in the worms than the walls, but I still remember the look on Roy's face when we laid the first cinder block. "This is it," he said. "What we're building." We meant more than a house, but foundations shift, quietly sometimes. You don't notice until the doorways start to stick and the stairs feel steeper than they used to. By the time I met with Mr. Adler, the new buyer, I had memorized every inch of our boundary line. He greeted me in a coat too thin for the wind, holding a portfolio so thick I wondered how long he'd waited for this moment. "Mrs. Hollis," he said, shaking my hand, "thank you for considering me." "Thank you for keeping your offer fair," I replied. He smiled. "My mother used to say, 'Buy land from people who understand what it means to lose it.'" He understood. That's why I chose him. The contract was clean. He would purchase the lower acre and the entire eastern portion of the property, including the driveway easement Jimmy had illegally extended when he widened the garage. I retained a life estate in the house, meaning they couldn't force me out. But the land? It was his now. I left Dana's office with a check, a very large one. I didn't need the money. That wasn't the point. At home, Jimmy was on a call. I heard him through the kitchen door, talking to someone about refinancing. Something about using the extra land as equity. Allison was in the pantry, muttering about delivery delays. She saw me walk in and did a double take. "Did you go out?" she asked. "I did," I said. "For groceries?" "No." She waited for me to explain, then gave up. I boiled water, poured a cup of tea, and went upstairs. That night, I sat at my little attic desk and made a list. One column, what I'd given them. The other, what I'd received. The left side filled the page. Mortgage payments, summer camps, repairs, bailout loans that were never called loans, diapers, divorce lawyers, down payments. The right side? A few birthdays remembered, a handful of Mother's Day cards. A faded painting Ellie made when she was 4. Jimmy's smile when he still had one that reached his eyes. The ledger wasn't balanced, but it didn't have to be anymore. The next morning, Richard called from the bank. The trust for Ellie was live. "Everything's in place," he said. "It's airtight. No access unless she's 25 or enrolled in school full-time, and only you can dissolve it." "Perfect," I said. "She's lucky," he added. "No," I corrected. "She's kind." That afternoon, I made muffins. Blueberry, Roy's favorite. I packed them into a tin and walked to the school just before dismissal. Ellie's eyes lit up when she saw me. She always looked surprised when I showed up, like she still wasn't used to being remembered. "Granny," she squealed. We sat on the bench outside the library. I handed her the tin. "These are just for you," I said. "Hide them if you must." She giggled. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," I said. "Just something sweet before the world gets complicated." Ellie nodded. Serious? Thoughtful. She's like me in that way. "Do you know how smart you are?" I asked. She shrugged. "Kinda." "Well," I said, "I know for sure. And I've made some arrangements for your future." Her eyes widened. "Like money?" "Like a promise," I said. "That no matter what happens in this house, you'll have something of your own. Something safe. Something they can't touch." She didn't fully understand. Not yet. But one day she would. When I got home, Jimmy was in the garage, pacing. The front door was open. Allison stood in the entry, arms folded. "Something wrong?" I asked, setting my coat on the hook. Allison turned. "Did you change something with the land registry?" I looked at her evenly. "Yes." Jimmy appeared behind her. "Ma, why would you do that without telling us?" "Because it's mine," I said. "And because you never asked before changing things either." "You sold part of the land," Allison said, as if accusing me of theft. "I did." Jimmy looked stunned. "But that's the driveway, the garden." "Yes," I said. "Mr. Adler will allow access, of course. He's very polite. But legally, you'll need to pay for easement rights going forward." "You can't be serious." "I've never been more." Allison's voice rose. "What about the kids? The house?" "I've protected them," I said, looking directly at Ellie, who had just stepped inside, muffin tin in her hands. "In ways you never thought to." It was quiet for a few seconds after I said it. Then Allison did what she always does when she feels control slipping. She changed the subject. "You know the gas is still off in the back bathroom," she said sharply, as if the real crisis here was faulty plumbing. Jimmy didn't speak. He was still looking at me like I'd become someone else. And maybe I had. Or maybe I just stopped pretending. Ellie stood frozen in the hallway, muffin tin clutched tight to her chest, eyes moving between us like a spectator at a play she hadn't meant to attend. I gave her a small nod. She slipped into the kitchen. "I'll be calling the county," Allison said, pulling out her phone. "There has to be some restriction on selling land without notifying the primary residence." "You're not the resident," I replied calmly. "You're a guest. I'm on the deed. You're on the mortgage." Jimmy's mouth opened, then shut. He knew I was right. "And if you call the county," I added, "you'll find everything was done legally. The land wasn't gifted to Jimmy. It was loaned. The paperwork was never filed. That's on him." Allison's fingers clenched around her phone. "I don't want to fight," Jimmy said suddenly, voice low. "Ma, this isn't what we wanted." "What did you want?" I asked. "For me to keep paying the bills while living like a tenant in my own house? For me to fund your lifestyle and be grateful for a space in the attic?" "That's not fair," he said. "We've supported each other." "No," I interrupted. "I've supported you. You don't get to rewrite that." He stepped back like I'd struck him. Allison turned away and stormed up the stairs. Later, she'd say she needed air. She always needs something when she doesn't get her way. That night, dinner was silent. No roast chicken, no wine, just overcooked pasta and the clink of forks in bowls. Ellie kept her eyes on her plate. Ben asked if the heat would come back soon. No one answered him. I went upstairs early. Not because I was tired, I was wide awake, but because I didn't want to be part of their discomfort. Let them sit in the silence they built. Let them feel what it's like when warmth is withheld. In the attic, I lit a small candle. Just enough glow to read by. I opened Roy's old book of property law, the one he insisted on keeping just in case. I smiled at the notes he'd left in the margins. He always believed knowledge was armor. Now I understood why. I heard them whispering below later. Jimmy's voice hushed and anxious. Allison's sharper, faster. Words like attorney and trust and cut off floated up the stairs like heat once did. They were trying to figure out how it happened, how I slipped through the cracks of their control. But it wasn't a crack. It was a door. One I chose to walk through. The next morning, I brewed coffee in my attic kettle and took it to the porch. I hadn't sat there since before the cold came, but the sun was out, and the frost had melted. It felt like a sign. Allison passed me on her way to the garage, pretending not to see me. Her heels clacked on the pavement. She got in the car and slammed the door too hard. Jimmy came out 10 minutes later. He looked tired. He didn't sit, just stood near the steps, hands in his pockets. "Ma," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I sipped my coffee. "You're already talking. I didn't know things felt so bad for you. That's because you didn't ask. I thought we were doing okay. You mean, you thought I was quiet enough not to notice." He sat finally on the edge of the step. I don't know what to say. "Then listen." And he did. For the first time in years, he listened. I told him about the cold, about the food I kept in bins, about hearing my name used like a utility, something switched on and off depending on need. "I never meant for that," he said. "I know," I replied. "But you allowed it." He rubbed his face. "What happens now?" I looked out across the lawn. The far corner was already staked with new boundary markers. Mr. Adler would start planting by spring. "What happens now," I said, "is you learn to live on what you've earned. No more. No less." They came to the kitchen like mourners. Allison first, face carefully composed, as if she'd practiced the expression in the mirror. Jimmy followed, slower, hands in the pockets of a jacket I bought him on clearance the year Ellie was born. It still fit him. Some things stay the same, whether you notice or not. I was already there, standing at the counter pouring myself a glass of water from the pitcher. I kept chilled by the attic window. Old habits. I trust the cold more than the fridge now. "Can we sit?" Jimmy asked. I nodded toward the table. "Of course." They sat across from me like clients at a consultation. Allison's hands were folded, fingers tight. Jimmy's eyes searched my face for softness. "We just want to understand what's going on," Allison said. "No," I replied. "You want to get ahead of it. That's different." Jimmy winced. "Ma, I told you," I said. "I'd listen. Now you listen." They waited. I've spent the last 6 years paying for a house I don't live in, feeding a family I'm not invited to belong to, and warming rooms I can't sit in. I've sold my comfort, my space, my quiet for your convenience. You didn't ask what that cost me. You assumed I had nothing else to give, and that I'd keep giving. Silence. Even Allison didn't try to interrupt. "I never asked for gratitude. I raised you to work hard and take care of what you're given. But somewhere along the way, Jimmy, you started treating me like a given. Not a person, not a partner, just part of the foundation. Something you build on without looking down." I didn't mean, "You didn't look," I said. He closed his mouth. Allison's jaw flexed. "I know what you're afraid of," I continued. "You think this is about revenge or punishment. It's not. It's about correction. The way you might write a crooked painting or close a door that's been left open too long." Allison cleared her throat. "And the land? What about it? You sold it?" "I did. To a stranger. To someone who asked." She flushed. "This affects us, May. It affects the children. Their play area, the garden. No, it affects your comfort. The children will adjust. Children do. You'll learn boundaries the way I learned silence." She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. Maybe she didn't. Maybe she'd never really tried. Jimmy leaned forward. "What do you want?" I looked at him then. My son. The boy who used to fall asleep in my lap after thunderstorms. The man who let his wife turn my home into a ledger of what I owed them. What I want, I said, is already in motion. The land is sold. The payments have stopped. The trust is secured. I'm not leaving this house, but I'm no longer financing it. You'll pay for your own heat, your own food, your own wants. He swallowed. You're cutting us off. I'm freeing myself, I said. Allison shook her head. This isn't sustainable. You'll need care eventually. And when I do, I'll pay for it with my own money, not by trading dignity for a room above your lives. Jimmy's eyes welled. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I loved you enough to believe you'd see it yourself. The kettle clicked off behind me. I turned, poured the water over a bag of mint tea. The scent calmed me. When I turned back, Jimmy looked older, smaller, like the boy I once had to explain death to, after our neighbor's dog passed. He'd cried then, big, honest tears, not because of the dog, but because the world had changed and no one warned him. It doesn't have to be like this, he said. No, I agreed. But it is. Allison stood, too fast. Come on, Jimmy. He stayed seated. She stared at him. You're not going to say anything? He shook his head. Not right now. She huffed and walked out, her heels sharp against the tile. I sipped my tea and waited. Jimmy looked up. Is there any way to fix this? Maybe, I said. But fixing starts with asking what broke. And who broke it? He nodded, stayed there another minute. Then he stood and quietly followed his wife. I stayed behind, not triumphant, not angry, just intact. The attic feels different now, not warmer. The radiator's still dead, and the window still lets in wind like it has something to prove. But I don't mind it. Cold is honest. It doesn't pretend to be anything but what it is. Unlike people. There's a strange relief in finally being seen as the woman you are, not just the one they need. Since our conversation in the kitchen, Jimmy's been quieter. Not cold, just cautious. Like someone walking across a floor he knows might creak. He's not used to me setting terms. Not used to wondering what I might say next. That's a shift he'll have to live with. Allison avoids me. Her footsteps disappear when I enter a room. She slams fewer doors now, but only because silence has become her version of protest. That's fine. I'm fluent in silence. I still see Ellie most evenings. She sneaks upstairs with stories about school, spelling tests, and questions she doesn't ask anyone else. Yesterday, she asked what power of attorney means. I told her it's when someone thinks they know what's best for you, and you let them, until you stop. She nodded like she understood more than a child should. We made paper boats. Let them float in the sink. She named hers Independence. Mr. Adler stopped by this morning. He walked the boundary line again, nodding thoughtfully, notebook in hand. He asked if I was comfortable. I told him, comfort is something you carry or you don't. He smiled. The surveyors are coming next week, he said. I'll make sure they stay clear of your porch. He's a good man. I'm not worried about him. I'm more worried about the way Jimmy looked out the window as he left, like he was watching someone carry out the living room one brick at a time. At dinner, the conversation is forced. Jimmy talks to the kids. Allison eats quickly, then disappears. They've stopped asking me to join them. I suspect it's a mix of shame and stubbornness. But I still sit at the table sometimes, long after they've left, sipping tea and letting the quiet settle. It feels like mine again. I've begun clearing drawers, not out of resignation, out of intention. I sort the things I want Ellie to have, not just later, but soon. The sewing kit Roy bought me the year Jimmy graduated. the recipe book, handwritten and food-stained, the broken locket that still holds a photo of Roy in his uniform. I don't plan to die anytime soon, but I do plan to live differently. Dana sent over the finalized paperwork this afternoon. It's all official now. The land is transferred. The trust is sealed. I signed the last page with a pen Roy gave me the day we paid off the mortgage. A stubby black thing with his initials scratched in. He would have liked Dana. He always respected women who didn't apologize for being exact. Tonight, I stood on the porch again. The stars were sharp above the bare trees. I could see the markers at the edge of the property, tiny flags fluttering like quiet declarations. Ellie joined me, wrapped in a blanket. "Will the new man live here?" she asked. "No," I said. "He'll use the land, but he won't touch the house." She nodded, thoughtful. "Will he cut down more trees?" "Not if he knows what's good for him." She giggled. Then after a pause, "Are you still mad at Daddy?" "No," I said, "but I'm different now." "Is that bad?" "No, sweetheart. That's what happens when you stop waiting to be rescued." She leaned against me, small and warm. I thought of the years I spent shrinking myself to fit the space they left me, of the silence I called love, of the way I made room for everyone, and no one made room for me. Not anymore. Now, they learned to live with me, not above me. Allison has started packing boxes. She hasn't said the word move, not out loud, but I've seen the signs. The hallway closet is emptier than it's been in years. The good china is gone from the cabinet. This morning, I found her wrapping picture frames in newspaper, the way people do when they're trying to look busy while making a decision they don't want to name. Jimmy hasn't said anything either. He still makes small talk, still offers coffee I don't drink, and questions he doesn't wait for the answers to. But there's something in his eyes now, a flicker of unease, like a man who finally realizes the road he paved is leading somewhere he didn't intend to go. I don't rush them. Let them come to it on their own. The truth is, I'm not forcing anyone out. I'm just not carrying them anymore. There's a difference. It's strange, the way a house changes when people begin to retreat. The rooms echo more. The fridge holds fewer things. Even the sound of the stairs, once filled with hurried steps, wet boots, tiny thuds of childhood, now seems hesitant, like they're afraid to disturb something. Ellie is the only one who moves through the house like it still belongs to her. She's made the attic her new hideout. Draws at my desk, leaves her books tucked between my pillows. Sometimes she just sits beside me, humming a tune I don't recognize. "You know what I want to be when I grow up?" she asked last night, legs swinging from the edge of the bed. "No," I said. "Tell me." "A person who makes rules," she said. "But good ones. Not the kind that make people small." I reached over and brushed her hair from her forehead. "Then you'll have to stay brave." "I am," she said simply. And I believed her. Today, a man from the county office stopped by. Routine inspection, Adler's paperwork required it. He was polite, took notes, asked if anyone else would be present. "No," I said. "I'm the owner." He nodded, unsurprised. I think the world's catching up to the idea that old women can own more than memories. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Just me, the late light, and the hum of a refrigerator that still runs better than most people expect it to. I remembered Roy there, elbows on the wood, his laugh low in his throat. I remembered Jimmy, too, coloring homework while I chopped onions. The smell of soup. The sound of the news in the background. the clatter of shoes by the door. They all lived here once. Now they're waiting for me to leave, but I won't. I didn't claw back this life just to walk away from it. Later, I found Allison in the garage, folding winter coats into bins. "You're leaving," I said, not a question. She kept folding. "This house isn't workable anymore." "No," I said. "It just isn't yours to remake." She paused. "Jimmy thinks we should stay and try again. I think he's afraid. He's always been afraid of disappointing people." She looked at me then, and for a moment I saw something almost honest in her. "You're not what I expected," she said. "You never asked what I was." She looked away. "It doesn't feel like home anymore." "It wasn't supposed to feel like yours." We stood there a moment longer. Then she turned back to her boxes. When I went upstairs, Jimmy was standing outside the attic door. He looked tired. "I don't know how to fix this," he said. "You don't," I replied. "You live with it, and you learn." He nodded. "Ellie says you're making her brave." "She already was." He tried to smile. "I don't think we're staying. Allison's looking at places closer to her sister." I didn't say anything. "I'll miss the porch," he added. I stepped aside to let him in. We sat on the attic bed together, him perched at the edge, me settled with the kind of calm you only get after a long winter. "I used to think you'd always be here to catch us," he said. "That was your mistake," I said. "I wasn't here to catch you. I was here to show you how to stand." He nodded, eyes wet. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. They left on a Sunday. No fanfare, no final blowout or ceremony. Just a moving van parked crooked in the driveway and the muffled sounds of a life being repacked. Coat by coat, book by book, apology by unspoken apology. Allison didn't say goodbye. She walked from the house to the car with her jaw set and her gaze fixed forward. She didn't glance at the porch, the garden, or the attic window where I stood watching. That was her choice. Jimmy hugged Ellie, then Ben. He kissed them both on their heads and helped them into the car. Ellie looked back once, not at the house, but at me. I raised my hand. Just a small wave. She pressed her palm to the glass and smiled. That was enough. Jimmy came back to the porch one last time. His face was pale, his eyes tired. "I'll still call," he said. "I know," I replied. "I mean it this time." I nodded. He looked around the porch, then up at the attic window. "It's a good house. You made it good." "It made me too," I said. "Don't forget that." "I won't." He stepped back, hands in his pockets. "Tell me something." "What?" "Do you feel better now? Winning?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I was unsure, but because it's the kind of question men ask when they still haven't understood the game. "I didn't win," I said. "I reclaimed." He looked down, nodded slowly. "Fair enough." They drove off a few minutes later. The van coughed down the road, tires stirring leaves. I stood at the porch rail until the sound disappeared. Then I went inside. The house was quiet in a way that wasn't lonely, just honest. No voices behind doors. No clicking heels. No whispers at the bottom of the stairs. Just me, the ticking clock, and a kettle warming on the stove. I spent the afternoon dusting. Not as a chore, but as an act of reintroduction. This was my house again. Every corner a chapter I remembered. The blue wallpaper in the pantry. The notch in the banister where Roy once tripped with a bag of groceries. The sun-faded square on the wall where our wedding photo used to hang. I put the photo back up. I unpacked the old quilt from storage and laid it across the couch. I opened every window in the attic and let the air move through like a blessing. The next morning, Mr. Adler's crew began work on the lower acre. No jackhammers, no heavy machines. Just quiet hands planting fruit trees. A long row of saplings now lines the edge of what used to be their backyard. A new boundary, not a wall, a garden. Later, Ellie called from Allison's phone. I answered before the second ring. "Granny?" she asked. "Can I still come over on Thursdays?" "Of course," I said. "Thursdays and any day you need to remember who you are." She giggled. "I like it better there." "I know," I said. And I did. I baked blueberry muffins that night, set aside 2 tins, one for her, one for Mr. Adler's crew. The rest I kept for the kitchen counter, where the light hits just right in the morning. The house has warmth again, not from the gas or the bills I no longer pay for someone else's comfort, but from the dignity of return. This house didn't need new walls or new paint or stainless steel appliances. It needed to be lived in with care. And I'm very good at care. Spring came slow that year, not with fanfare or sudden color, but in the quiet way all true things return. The ground softened. The frost disappeared from the attic window. One morning, I opened the porch door and smelled earth instead of cold. The trees Mr. Adler planted had started to take. Thin branches, small buds, nothing dramatic. But I walked the edge of the property each week, checking their progress like you might check on children who don't know they're being watched. I never told him how much it meant to see things growing again. The house is mine now in a way it hadn't been in years. Not just on paper, in rhythm, in sound, in breath. I talk out loud sometimes, which I never used to do. Just little things, reading recipes aloud, commenting on the weather, asking Roy what he would have done with the east-facing fence. He never answers, but I still feel heard. Ellie comes every Thursday, just like she said. Sometimes she stays for dinner. Sometimes we just sit on the porch and write down words we like. Kindness, bluebird, independence, stillness. She says she wants to make her own dictionary. I told her she already has. Jimmy calls once a week now. He doesn't ask for money, doesn't offer apologies. He just checks in, tells me about work, says Ellie misses me. I tell him I'm fine. That's not a lie anymore. As for Allison, we don't speak. I think that's best. There are moments when the quiet surprises me, when I catch myself waiting for footsteps that won't come, or the sound of someone rummaging through drawers that are mine again. But the absence isn't hollow. It's clean. There's strength in stillness. I know that now. I used to think dignity meant holding your tongue, bearing what you must. But that's not true. Dignity is knowing when silence becomes complicity. It's knowing when to stop giving and start choosing. I chose. That doesn't make me hard. It makes me whole. One day, Ellie asked if I was angry. No, I told her. Anger's too loud. I'm just finished. She nodded like she understood. This morning, I opened the kitchen window and let the wind move through the curtains. I sat with my tea and watched a squirrel dart across the porch rail. The sun touched the hardwood in long golden lines. The kettle clicked off, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to rush toward or away from anything. Everything I needed was already here. Everything I gave away, I gave with love. But what I kept, that was mine. And that is enough. If this story held something you recognize, a room you've lived in, a silence you swallowed, a warmth you were denied, leave a comment. Maybe someone else needs to know they're not alone.